Good evening and welcome. I'm Lori Carbonneau, Executive Director of McLean Project for the Arts, and on behalf of Barbara Hawthorne and my entire staff and Board of Directors and Advisory Board, I am honored to welcome you to Give and Take. This is a thrilling exhibition to witness in person as well as be on together tonight. We've got a terrific group of us on. We've passed 60 participants, and we welcome you. It is a treat to be a part of this ongoing series of this rich artist community that's carrying us through COVID. And I'm also happy to share that our galleries are open on a daily basis. The hours are on our website, and we invite you to come in and experience this magical space. Tonight, I'm not going to speak very long because we have a great lineup for you, but I would like to make sure that everybody knows the wonderful history of McLean Project for the Arts and the programming that we do. 2022 marks our 2022 marks our 60th anniversary as a robust arts and community organization that is connecting the arts community with the region in a way that inspires creativity and learning and community. We have three strong elements of our program. Our exhibition you'll be witnessing tonight. We have shown the work of more than 3,000 artists during our 60 years of MPA history. We also, under the leadership of Director Sharon Fischel, have an outreach program called MPA Artreach, which reaches thousands of people throughout the region in schools, in communities of special need, and in senior communities, helping them encounter this art and experience a curated and a docent-led tour in our galleries and online. And finally, we have a rich education program, and I see several of our teachers are among us tonight and the participants. Thank you all so much. Again, welcome. Please come experience the MPA Gallery and enjoy this evening. Nancy, please take it from here.
Hello, everyone. I'm delighted to see so many on the list as participants. We are broadcasting live tonight, or at least I am with Jen here helping me out, from the Emerson Gallery. So we are in the midst of the Give and Take show. And then right outside the hallway is Sheila Kreider's Intersectional painting exhibit, which you can see if you look at Lori Carbonneau's background. So we're just delighted to have almost all of the artists with us tonight. Emily Brzezinski is down in Florida. So we're gonna represent her with a bit of a film clip. But everyone else is gonna be talking with me about their work live. And then at the end, we'll all be on together and we'll have a chance to talk amongst ourselves and also do a little bit of a Q&A from the chat. So we're starting with Sheila Kreider, and she, as I mentioned, has the work in the Atrium Gallery. She's exhibiting works from an ongoing series that combines painting, drawing, braiding, stitching, and weaving, creating three-dimensional abstract forms and hangings. Through these works, which are both beautiful and evocative, Kreider has found an inventive and original process that enables her to visually explore, using an abstract language, multiple intersections between material, place, tradition, race, gender, history, culture, narrative, art, painting, object, and picture, just to name a few. Sheila Kreider is an American abstract artist born in Beckley, West Virginia. Her interest in art is intertwined with her love for language. She explores the visual possibilities of language, as well as the notion of art as language and language as art. Kreider attended University of Virginia in Charlottesville, where she studied African American studies and obtained her Bachelor of Arts. Since then, she's been the recipient of many awards, grants and commissions as well. Sheila was an artist in residence at Stone Quarry Hill Art Park in Cazenovia, New York, at Leighton Studios, at Banff Center in Banff, Canada, and at Site Internationale des Arts in Paris, France. So welcome, Sheila.
Thank you.
We have a gray box in the screen. I don't know what those are. Yeah, there we go. There's also a bar on the top. We don't want to cover up the pieces. Okay. Okay, Sheila. Well, Jen is getting rid of those gray boxes. Let's get started talking about the work.
Okay.
So just to start out, what would you say are the primary underlying concerns you're addressing through your work?
Well, in this particular series, what I'm looking at is the idea of community. And I'm looking at it through the use of quilt batting, because quilt batting is a substrate that is very common. And I think that is something that that holds a lot of weight. And I guess let me start over. The quilt batting is a great substrate for me because it takes a lot of abuse. Honestly, the cutting, the stitching, the weaving, all of that, it's able to really maintain the things that I want it to do. Unlike paper, I found this material by chance in a thrift store, and I was going to a residency in Paducah, Kentucky, which is a textile center. And that's how the Intersectional series came about, because I thought, well, I'm going to a textile center. I didn't know it. It's happenstance. Let me come up with a way to incorporate that into this body of work. And that's how I came up with the idea of quilt batting as community, because it was the thing that tied everything together for me. So.
Great. And it's one of the things that's so wonderful about that material, I think, too, is not only that it maintains its body and stiffness so that you can weave with it and create forms with it, but it also it absorbs the color so well.
Yes. Yes, it drinks a lot of color.
Yeah.
And working on these pieces, I actually put canvas down below it so that it would actually absorb a lot of the excess color. And I'm working on a series now from those pieces, those canvases that I laid down. But to me, that's one of the things that's important is the spontaneity also that comes from the material. Is that I don't know exactly how the paint is going to be absorbed once it's dried. I mean, because it's double-sided, so that sometimes it soaks all the way through, sometimes it doesn't. And so that I can have something going on both sides of the cloth, so that I get a real dimensional feeling to it.
Yeah, that's great. And you really have to see these pieces also to see the intensity of the color. So you're starting to talk about the process here. Could you talk a little bit about how your works are conceived and what the path is that you take in order to bring them into being?
Well, this work was interesting, like I say, because I was going to this textile center. And once I decided I was going to be working with the quilt batting, I just gave myself a project. If it was going to be about community, then I would make work that related to humanity. And I decided that I was going to be doing these things, the stitching, the weaving, the braiding, and that I would start with one long braid. And that I, like my friend Stevens Carter, who did a little piece that was called Family of Man, represented the races with color red, yellow, black, green, not green, red, yellow, black, brown. Okay, but those were the colors that I started out with, and I don't have a picture of it here because the Paducah work was kind of like the prequel to the series, if you will.
Yeah.
But that's how it started, with one long braid. And then once I did that work, I wanted to create something that was more pictorial and that was more narrative. And that's how actually this blue piece that's up on the screen now came about, because I did that directly after I came back from Paducah. So that started the series that we're looking at now in the gallery.
Yeah. So before then, you had been really more strictly a painter, and you hadn't done all the stitching and weaving and
Well,
fabric?
yes, I've been doing stitching and weaving all along, but I had never really related it to community until I did this particular series of work.
Mhm.
I've always liked stitching and sewing and things like that, and I used it in my work, but it wasn't really a concept until this series.
Yeah, yeah. And did you, so you didn't necessarily do, I guess what I'm trying to find out too is if you start with one of these pieces, does it do it, how much spontaneity is involved in the process? How much of a plan do you start with? And how much, obviously, you know, you're talking about blotting and the color and you can't, that's
Mhm.
spontaneous. What about the shape building? Is that a combination of spontaneous and planned as well?
Well, yes, in a certain sense, in that I'll allow the work to direct me in a certain way.
Mhm.
When I did the wall hangings, like the blue piece, I took a step back because I'm always trying to push the work in a direction that I haven't taken it for my own, uh, I guess, exploration and trying to find a way to communicate that I haven't used before,
Yeah,
something that's more interesting for people. So I'm always trying to find a way for the work to go further than it's been. And
yeah.
in this particular series, I got to a point where I was kind of stuck. So I worked on a series of grid pieces that were just strips of cloth that were left over from a large series of pieces that I did. And once I was working and one of the grids landed on a flat piece, that's what took the work into a dimensional area, is that it just happened to land there. And I thought, let's go 3-dimensional.
Great. I'm glad you did.
Me
I've been
too.
the pieces, the tubular pieces that are hanging. Um,
Hmm.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. I hope folks will be able to come in and take a look at the show. And we'll have, there's be a chance to ask you questions through the chat a
Hmm.
little later on in the hour.
I would really like to say too that I think that you and Jen did a fabulous job hanging this show, because I think that it really hangs together really well the way you've put it in.
Thank you. Thank you. We appreciate that. We love that space. It's a wonderful
Hmm.
it kind of reads like a book almost. Yeah,
Hmm.
great. Thanks, Sheila.
Thank you.
Um, Next, we move into the gallery that I'm sitting in right now in the Emerson Gallery and the exhibit called Give and Take Building Form, which features work by Emily Venice Brzezinski, Rachel Rottenberg, Norma Schwartz, and Fun Sham. These abstract sculptural works by these four artists are primarily made of wood. And this exhibit explores each artist's personal vision along with their methodology of making. By employing varying degrees of adding and subtracting material, laminating or carving, sawing and sanding, these artists build form by either giving or taking away. With this in mind, process is highlighted, understood, and demonstrated with an eye towards clarifying the genesis and emergence of form. Bringing these works of these four artists together in this space really exceeded the expectations I had when I conceived of the exhibit. I definitely think something magical has emerged from their vicinity to one another, and an unexpected commonality has happened. Differences are complementary and bring about exciting visual and conceptual conversations. The artists have all created objects that exist in the quotidian realm, yet they have each folded into these objects their unique ideas and energy, embedded the life force of the wood that they are made from, a material that epitomizes life and growth itself. So we are lucky enough to have Rachel Rottenberg here with us, who has kindly agreed to get up in the middle of the night because she is joining us from outside of Jerusalem. You can see some of her works in the slides there. So Rachel Rottenberg was born in Toronto, Canada, and attended university in Toronto, Jerusalem, and New York City, receiving her BFA from York University. In 1984, she moved to a studio in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and chose wood as her primary medium. Rottenberg moved to Baltimore with their family in '94, and in 2014, she began sculpting for extended periods of time overseas in Israel. She has received artist grants from the Franz and Virginia Bader Fund, the Harold and Ruth Chevron Foundation, the Pollock Krasner Foundation, and also received a Creative Baltimore Individual Artist Award and grants from the Art Bank of Canada and the ED Foundation. Rachel, welcome.
Hi.
Are you wide awake?
I'm awake. Yes.
Great.
Thank you.
Great. So I'm gonna ask you more or less the same questions that I asked Sheila, starting with what are the primary underlying concerns you're addressing in your work? And you can just use these as cues if you want to talk.
Yes, no, I understand. I think it's so interesting. You know, we all have reasons in which that draw us into our studios to work. Any reason that I tell you is shall we say, real covering up the main reason is that I just love building and putting things together and finding new forms and discovering what can come out of whatever it is that I'm building. What I find actually in making sculpture is that there are certain themes that come out because I'm making them. And those themes are generally to do with relationships. So what you'll find in my work, let's see, we've got 4 pieces in front of us. There in the bottom left-hand corner, you've got these 4 pieces of wood, so to speak, that are either coming together or pulling apart. There's an energy and a movement in my work. There in the middle piece, there's the metal, that's metal worked into a wood structure. And you've got 2 forms side by side that are slightly different. Often there's a sense of 2 different aspects of the piece. In this case, they are, shall we say, joined at the hip. Mm-hmm. And then in the one on the right, there's a piece of vine that I had found, and it inspired me to make this form that is twisted and opened and pulling. My colors are generally used to bring out the form to help your eye see what I'm seeing. So in that piece on the right side of the screen, you can see the insides and the outsides. There's insides, there's outsides, there's an energy that I want to express.
Yeah, well, and I think at this point, if you talk a little bit too about the process, how you conceive of the pieces, what the process you take them through to bring them into being is, that also speaks to the underlying content. And also that you really don't work in series, right? Each piece, and you can see this from just looking at these 4 pieces, that each piece is very distinct.
Yes.
Yeah, they all look like your work.
Yeah, right. But they're not a series of the same forms.
Yeah.
I start off with drawings. I'm working with 2x4 and 4x4 pieces of lumber. What I particularly like about that is that I can then build them up together in order to form whatever shape I have imagined. And where I imagine it is in my drawing book. So I'm always starting off with drawings. I work through, you know, all kinds of iterations of any form that comes to my mind. And I do that until I find something that speaks to me. And then I play with it extensively until I really like what I have happening on the page. I need to do that in order to know how I'm going to put the pieces of wood together. So that's the building together. And then once I have a form that's working, I'm sanding it down, I'm cutting. I often have to go back to the drawing board and find a solution if I've run into a problem.
Yeah, you're working with big things and weight and balance and things that have to work out when you bring them into the actual world.
Right, you know, and sometimes, and I think that's, for me, that's really where the excitement comes from, is that first there's, can I build this thing that I drew? And then as I begin putting the sculpture together, the sculpture takes on, shall we say, a voice of its own, and it starts to tell me if I'm going on in the right way or not. I feel a commitment to the piece as soon as I start building it, and the commitment is to make it work. So it can be that my original drawing isn't actually what's going to end up. So I would say that in these 4 pieces that you see, 2 of them ended up very much like the original drawing, and 2 of them I had to go back and work out problems and find the sculpture that wanted to be built, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And what does that mean? That I guess what I would say is that my commitment is to bring the sculpture to a point where it has its own voice, where there's a feeling that the viewer, I'm hoping, standing in front of it, will feel a sense of energy, or, I mean, each piece is different, but that's what I'm hoping for. And when you do stand in front of these pieces, and there's a scale, of course, that we're missing when we just look at them online. Yeah. My pieces really speak like body to body when you're standing in front of them, and that's an exciting process for me. Just like, yeah,
it's like you're meeting them.
I often joke, you know, that in the sense that I create these beings that then I put out into the world, and they have to start speaking for themselves, or they're not ready. And like my children, like I had to bring them up, but then I put them out there, and they create their own relationships after that.
Yeah, that's great. Nicely put. Thanks a lot, Rachel.
Thank you.
Next, we will meet Fun Sham, and you see his pieces here. Fun Sham is a Virginia-based artist, professor of art at the University of Maryland, College Park, and he has over 40 solo exhibitions of his work, both in the US and abroad, and is represented in both public and private collections worldwide. He received his BFA from California College of the Arts and his MFA from Virginia Commonwealth University. Welcome, Fun.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for inviting me to be part of this exhibition. Thank you, Nancy, and thank you, Laurie, and for the McLean Project of the Arts. This is my first time showing in your gallery, so it's a privilege to be a part of your exhibition. And so, I'm going to start to react to what question you might have for me.
Wonderful. Well, I think it might be nice if you started out by describing the process of how you build these pieces, and also, touch on where the ideas come from and how they emerge for you.
Okay. First, I think it has to do with the material to start with for this series. Well, not series, the right way is this group of work that were done, over the last 10 years in different times. So I'm looking back now to what they appear to me. But the process started with tree fell in somebody's home or in someone else's garden or landscape or somewhere. So these all material come from fallen trees from the neighborhood of Riverdale in Maryland and Kensington and also Virginia, different places. So when the tree fell and the wood become kind of available material, I've been getting calls from people around in this region to ask me to, is there any use for me? And I feel very motivated to see a material like tree material get, become, in a way, become trash material if you don't pick them up. So I end up go to the site and with some helpers and, cut them into smaller logs and then turn into planks, bring to studio and then cut them with bandsaw and then plane them into planks and then into sticks. And then I start cutting them up to create my pieces. So the source of material is a more like extending the life of the tree philosophically, the tree has gone, but now I want to revive it to become another form, which is sculpture, abstract sculpture that has its own name, has its own identity and has its own color. So I hope become almost like a new person and character. And so these were inspired by, I don't exactly have a theme when I built these pieces. They were mostly inspired from my collection of traveling around different places in the country, including, Grand Canyon to all the landscapes in Utah and Colorado. I love those layers of rock in different colors being revealed over time of erosions. And those are again the remains of our land and our earth that give us those natural beauty, which I want to repeat myself very clear here. There's no way for me to even compete a second with those natural beauty. I am tiny 0, 0, 0, nothing. But here I want to spill out what I love about these texture in the natural environment and recreate it on my own and collect these tree material and rebuild them in a way that I want them to be built. That by basically human way of natural primitively building pieces of wood block by block. And then when you build up, layers of block, you get a structure and then it becomes a different way to establish that structure to able to stand on its own. So all these pieces are stacked together without a second thought. You put it down and that will be it. Although I, like Rachel said, start with drawing. I make preliminary drawings and then kind of like sketch out what I want. But then when I start building, I will basically go on my own journey with the wood I have available around me. So I pick like a painter choosing palette of wood. I have all this wood cut into planks, and then I would choose different pieces and start cutting them into blocks. And I layer wood, let's say with some cherry on the bottom, and then I start layer maybe some hickory on the second. So that give you that variation of layering, similar to what land were formed with limestone, redstone to more slate color. So that building method is basically almost like architects say, building a building by layering, by story. And and then I also want to have some human relationship. These are all, like Rachel said, relate to a people almost like human scale size. And many of them are really a range of my eyesight to a little bit above me. I would prefer they are bigger than me because that's the way I see landscape, that they are at least taller than myself. And they do have crack and openings. And just like landscape do have erosion of caves at opening, canyons to, gaps between them. And I love to kind of peek through those little gaps to see things in between. So that lead to my bigger size scale work that I really actually want now and before, that people can come into the inner space of my sculpture. I see my, the piece in my back, that is a maze structure that actually allowed, 30 to 50 to 100 people going there at the same time to experience the journey being inside the pieces.
Yeah.
So then there's some, go ahead, Nancy.
thinking about people in a way, whether it's a human scale or whether it's larger than human scale, but allowing people to be walking through and experiencing from the inside out too.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
So
So
you might see some of the trace of these three pieces do have the actual texture of the material, especially the four direction on the right piece. That is all the black walnut moved from the Riverdale that has the original tree bark actually left over. So give you a little history of the actual surface skin of the
Yeah.
tree, while some of the left-hand side pieces, the two of those are somewhat removed, except the texture of the actual chainsaw carving of the bandsaw, marks are all there. But none of these three pieces I have do any what they call sanding and carving on it, because I really want them to look natural in a way, not natural, meaning already handmade, hand transfer, but also natural in terms of recording the process. One thing
Yeah.
I love to bring it out, just think about your title, Give and Take. These are all given, the wood were given to me and I took them. So kind of re-echoing your title of the show, which has nothing to do with when I build them, when I think about this. So.
it's a great additional layer there. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Next, I think we're gonna bring the work of Emily Venice Brzezinski. We have a little film clip here that gives you an idea about her process.
It's very
Producer first, sorry. She was born in 1932 in Geneva, Switzerland, and immigrated to the United States and grew up in California and graduated from Wellesley College with a degree in art history in 1953. She began her art career in the 1970s, working with a variety of media, including resins, latex, and wood fiber. Her expressive themes always related to nature. Eventually, she shifted her focus to creating monumental wood sculpture using a chainsaw and an axe to carve towering forms that breathe new life into felled trunks. Brzezinski has had several gallery and museum installations, both in the United States and overseas, and many of her works are in the Czech Republic, the country of her family's origin. She has a piece, Prague Titans, on the Vltava River, and another installation called Broken Blocks that can be seen in the National Gallery in Prague. And in the US, her bronze Arch in Flight stands just 2 blocks from the White House in front of the Federal Reserve Building on New York Avenue. And her most monumental work to date, which is also cast in bronze, called Lament, greets visitors in front of the circle at the Krieger Museum, right here in DC. Okay, take it away.
natural for one to do it because you cross-cut one in one direction and then you chip it in the other direction.
With a chainsaw?
No, you chip it actually with a mallet and a hammer.
And then which is coarse?
Well, this is one of them.
This is one of them.
Yeah.
Okay. It's huge.
These are these oblong-shaped. They're not regular. They're crooked.
Right.
And that's why I picked them, because I happen to like things which have an unusual shape. I come from Czech Republic. I'm not Swiss, but I was born in Switzerland. During the war, we were in England, and I spent some time during the bombings in London, and then my school was evacuated to a place south of England. But we were lucky to escape the V2 bombs, and we went to California. This was like a paradise. My father used to take me on these huge trips up the Oregon coast, where there were beaches of washed up driftwood that we would pick through and find beautiful shapes, beautiful types of wood. And I used to make little carvings. Wood is a remarkable material because it has such inspiring forms in it, but you have to search it out. You have to find the extraordinary piece. And my aim is to not overdo, because I want the wood also to speak for itself. It's
Very nice clip there. I think it really allows you to see into what she's doing. And like Foon, she never goes out and cuts down those trees. They're they're found or they're found for her, one or the other. Next we have Norma Schwartz. She is a fascinating woman, born in Argentina and immigrated to Spain. And then 20 years later came here to the US. And she is for many years has been a psychoanalyst in private practice and also a teacher. When she came to the US, she learned the language of sculpting. And she now has I guess you might say a double practice or a bifurcated practice, actively practicing psychotherapy and working on her sculptures. So Norma?
Yes, thank you. Thank
Hello,
you,
there you
Nancy.
are. Welcome. Very nice to see you. So let's start out talking about your process and about how these pieces come into being.
The process is like, I can share what Fon was saying and Rachel, no? We start with the material and we try to shape it in the way that the material wants to be shaped, I think. I draw, I make a lot of models in clay, and I start sculpting.
And you sometimes work in stone too.
I work in stone. I start working in stone, in cement, in making jewelry with wood also. But the wood has something that is so amazing, no? Is as Brzezinski said, no? And we share that, no? Is a memorable material. Is so sensual in a sense, no? I love when my sculptures are touched because gives the sense of something erotic there. No, it's like touching the skin of a child, or no, it's really is a great material to work for me, and allowed as in the pieces that we share in the space. No, allow the big thing. No, you can do these big things. No, that stone doesn't allow because it's for me it's very heavy.
Yeah. Yeah, this you can build up to the size and shape that you want.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, and one of the things I think is interesting about the way that you work with the wood is that you really use the lamination process to control and add color, which is the natural variations of the colors of the wood, but it's not just surface color, it also is part of the form itself. So those striations help to define the shape.
Yes, that's true. And it's also the possibility to sculpture the light too, because the light is a part of the sculpture, no? But the way that you introduce me, what am I? No, I am a psychoanalyst. I am a sculptor. No, I come here to this Zoom late because I was teaching. No, it's all together, and I have the conscious about that with you, Nancy. Until you, I didn't have the conscious how these two pieces of myself are together. No, I don't know what is what. I don't know if I sculpture as a psychoanalyst, or I am a psychoanalyst I don't know, because the two has to do with language, has to do with the way that I want to say something, and the way that I know that the other won't receive it, and in the way that I want to show it. The other will interpret through their own history, and the interpretation is part of the sculpture. They has a name, and after that, it's, as Rachel said, their own life.
Yes, yes. And we should mention too that most of your names do come from your psychoanalytic
Yes,
practice.
yes. Most of the names are concepts and psychoanalysis
Yeah,
in
yeah,
a theory that is Lacan theory.
yeah. And I love that. I love the way you talk about them and relating to words, and also the inside outside conversation that you have going on within the forms,
Yes.
which just really seems to there's a revealing that happens, I would think, that is similar to your other practice of
Yes.
psychoanalysis. Yeah, yeah. So what would you say in the final analysis you hope the viewer takes away from experiencing your work?
In general, or in this particular situation.
Oh, in general, I was thinking, but however you want to address it.
In this particular situations, I am honored, really a honor to be between these great artists, because I think, oh, wow, no, in this way, this is sharing this space with all of you and with you, Nancy, too, is a great experience, a gift for life that I didn't expect, and thank you.
Oh,
And what I want, the only thing that I want to transmit to the other is to have pleasure. The only thing is pleasure, not to enjoy the pieces, to enjoy the moment of going around. It's my only objective is to transmit some kind of beauty, the only.
Mhm. Very nice. Thank you so much. All right. Well, that was wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for all of your thoughts and responses, and for coming tonight. So now we're all up together, and I think that we can take some questions from the chat. I see there are some there, and then also I have a few other questions if we like. And then I thought I would start first, though, by asking you all if you all had any questions to ask of each other, anything that you wanted to know now that we're all captive here on the screen.
I wanted to ask Rachel what her woods were.
I'm using cedar, red cedar from west coast of Canada. I like that wood. It's a great building material. It's not too heavy. We're like Norma was saying, there's a weight issue that one has to deal with. It stays straight. It smells delicious. I actually just got myself a MIG welder, which is going to help me put some metals back into the sculptures that I'm building. And I like what happens when the two materials come together, but I do not like the welding process. It's messy and it's smelly. And then when I get back to the wood, it's like, oh, that's so nice. And I know it's actually not very healthy, but it does feel good. And so it's the cedar, very aromatic wood.
Yeah. It's striking to hear you all talk about the material of wood, because it is a special material, because it is a material that is a life form too.
Mm.
And that your reverence for that material really comes across when you talk about it, but absolutely when you're sitting here in the room surrounded by your pieces, for sure. There's a question from the chat for Foon. And the question is, do you see yourself making immersive installations in the future? And I think you can answer that partly by pointing out what's behind you in your screensaver, right?
Yes, I do want to redone in a way the larger pieces that people can put in. There was the piece behind me was 26 by 26 feet by 9 feet tall, which is large, but in that museum looks small. But if you compare the Grand Canyon, there's nothing. So large scale is a very relative term, but I find out that human scale is, is comfortable for us to be around, that they are larger than us. But once you put ourselves against the big landscape, we are very, very, we are diminished quickly. But doesn't stop me from thinking large scale, though. I do want, to have a chance, opportunity to even, make larger pieces, but then other factor come in mind, right? Budget, resources and time. And at the same time, so, so I always admire artists bigger than myself that who are able to make large pieces like Crystal's work. He's, quarter mile of Australian coastline to, going through 5 counties in California. So those are inspiration work that human being could do. But at the same time, I do like to, get involved with work that are larger scale, that are bigger than, so people can get in. Yes, I do. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And again, that's another way of exploring sort of the interior, exterior.
That's right. That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah,
And-
yeah.
Soon, if I could ask, I'm wondering when you started working with the scale of the individual elements that you're using to build your sculptures. It's these, because you've made a decision to cut the wood a certain thickness of the plank and the pieces, and I'm wondering if you could speak to that.
In terms of the dimension I chose.
That yes, of the elements that that you
think
use.
For some reason, I'm very comfortable with that between 1 3/4 to 2 inches size to work with. Frankly, as you all know, I'm not a big guy. Things that like 4x4, with lumber will start to become heavy already to me. So that, 1.5 to 2 inches range to me is what I call comfortable for me to lift per piece. And then I like that ratio between the scale with the thickness. Once become, let's say 4x4 to me, almost too thick for that kind of line of texture to create. So that become, I would say less lines, right? If you thicker wood, the amount of horizontal line become less, and I choose not to be not comfortable with it. Although, there's another artist who use 4x4 beside yourself, is Ursula, I cannot pronounce her last name very well.
Right.
Yeah, and she used 4x4, but she used to use a circular saw to kind of carve the texture on the end so that you cannot tell the thickness of it. So I don't know whether I answer your question, but the thickness of the wood.
I think you answered it actually very nicely. Thank you very much.
Yeah. How about yourself? About the choice of the thickness?
For me, it's at the 4x4 or splitting that in half to a 2x4 is a good building block for me to create the forms. And so I guess it's where we start and where we're comfortable, of course, because we're building with it. And so we have to find the way that it works.
To make a quick correction with myself, on the smaller work, I do not have uniform thickness. The pieces you see in the show in Emerson Gallery are all, each one different thickness, because the source material different, and I plane it to different size for every layer. So I can control the amount of texture I get and the amount of thickness I want for different layers. So I do sometimes change from 1.5 to, not even know, like 1/4 inch, and then become 1/8, and then go back to 3/8 again. So there's no, what I call, formula for me to repeat itself. But the maze piece behind me, because I have to build with such a short time with the large scale, I end up using 2x4, which is industrial material that come in a standard size.
Yeah.
So it varies. Okay.
I've seen some small wall pieces of yours in the past, Poon, too, that had tiny, tiny little blocks.
Yes, they are range from 1/16, 1/8 to whatever. I make that more, organic in that sense.
Great. We have a question too for Sheila about if you would talk a little bit about the title "Belly of a Champion."
I came up with that title because I was thinking about sumo wrestlers And that's where the title came from, because, you know, it was kind of fat, you know, and it was about it being a winner, you know. So the idea is that this is what happens, you know, the champion. It was interesting because I was doing this work to show at Superfine last year, and somebody came in and he said that the champion had gone to seed, meaning that instead of the six pack, the champion had gotten fat. So, I mean, you know, it's also the irony of somebody who is a champion and being able to eat as much as he wants, she wants, you know. It was the irony. And I think that it's what Norma said about, you know, pleasure. You know, if you're looking at the piece, then I think that aesthetically, there's a lot going on that will give you a lot of pleasure with your eyes. But then if you want to stimulate the mind, then you give it a title that will take your mind someplace else with the work. And I think that's very important, because those are the kind of things that I'm trying to share and what I want people to take away from it. I want people to wonder, what does she mean, belly of a champion? Because it's provocative. And I want people to be provoked into thinking when they're looking at my work. I do want them to think it's beautiful, but I also want them to be provoked by it and to have some relation to what's actually going on in life.
Yeah, thank you. There's a question about the horizon. And I think it could be asked of all of you, but I'm going to ask it of Norma. And just in terms of, does the horizon play any role in your work in terms of how these places live in space or live in the world?
When you said horizon, what do you mean?
I think that probably this is somebody else's question, but the way I'm reading it or thinking about it is it makes me think about, you know, where the horizon being kind of a resting space, it being kind of a definition of, or a nod to the landscape that the piece is part of, or the interior landscape, or even the interior landscape of, you know, the psychological interior landscape that may be there. And I'm just wondering if that's something that you've thought about in relation to how your pieces sort of live in the world and
Yes.
Are in space.
Yes. It's an interesting question because it has to do with movement, no? Horizon has to do with movement, with something that comes from there, like the sun, no? Comes to there and moves and has a cycle, and also the horizontal, no? The lines, no? It's an interesting question there. Yeah. It's new for me. I didn't think about that, but when people look at the work, and perhaps this is something that is shared, many times the link is to nature, no? The link is to nature.
Right.
Perhaps it's because of the wood, no? The wood and is nature, is nature inside, no? Bringing nature inside. Mm-hmm.
And also the forms are so
yes,
reminiscent of a lot of natural forms. Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else want to talk about that? I thought that was kind of an interesting way. It's not something that sculptors or object makers necessarily put into words, but it is definitely something that could be an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah, I have a response to that. Interestingly, I'm building horizontally to achieve a vertical form. So kind of keep repeating, right, horizontally by layering, and then I end up going vertical in 99% of the time. But at the same time, then I create, ups and downs and create by changing that horizontal dimension, basically, right, and then create that vertical, negative. So that's interesting way to answer that question. I think that was an interesting question, by the way.
Yeah, and the horizon always being the horizontal there. Yeah.
Right.
And you all deal with, Sheila having the weaving. Weaving is
right.
an interaction between the vertical and the horizontal too.
Yeah, that was interesting, his response, because for me, it made me think about going from the flat surface to the round to the columns. Because it was interesting, when they were flat, they were one thing, but the minute that I made them round, I was
Yes.
dealing with a totally different concept
Yes.
and how the piece is read.
Mhm.
You know, when the woven shape became round.
Mhm.
Right. Yeah.
And,
And
also each is like a structure, no? It's taking one by one and putting it together. This is something that we have all in common, because Brzezinski, I think she made with one piece, no? She took this is different, but
Right.
we that are here present, that working with wood, is like working with words, with a discourse. Is putting together one to the other, to the other, to the other, and we have something that is like a line, no? That is, yes, a discourse, a tale. We make a tale with words that are pieces of wood, can we say, no?
Yeah. That's a lovely way to look at it.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, we're kind of at the end of our hour. I wanted to just ask if any of you all had any other questions for each other, or just thoughts or responses.
I just want to encourage anyone who's watching who is in the McLean area to go see the show, because the pictures don't do justice to what Nancy has, well, the whole staff has done to bring the work together in that beautiful space.
Agreed.
Thank you. We have a great gallery here, and this is I always say that the Emerson Gallery really is one of the very best spaces for sculpture, I think, in the whole Washington, Baltimore, Mid-Atlantic region. And I also think that's true of the Atrium Gallery. But those sculptures have to stay a little closer to the wall, which Sheila's do beautifully. And I really am just loving living with the work. And spending time with it, and like all really great art, it's revealing itself in layers over time in new ways. Every day we come in and spend time with it. So thank you all very, very much for coming. Special thank you again to Rachel for getting up. It's such a terrible hour, but you did great. All of you, thank you.
Thank you, Nancy.
Nice to see you, Rachel. Haven't seen you for a while. Just say hello to your daughters and children.